All right. Welcome to another episode of A Fresh Perspective with Jeff Charles, and we're live this time. It feels like it's been so long since I've gone live, because it's been a long time since I've gone live. But I'm happy to be with you. Got a very special guest for you today. Something very important that we're going to be talking about. So definitely welcome to this live episode of A Fresh Perspective, where we prefer truth over narrative and principles over personalities. Um, Also, if you want to support my work, the links are in the show notes and all that good stuff. Also want to remind you that LibertyNation.com is a proud sponsor of A Fresh Perspective with Jeff Charles. Check out LibertyNation.com for all of your conservatarian news, analysis, all that good stuff. You can check out the Conservative Five, their flagship television show, Liberty Nation TV, brand new podcast, all that good stuff at LibertyNation.com, where truth is making a comeback. Now, without further ado, I want to go ahead and bring her on. I'm speaking with Miss Gabrielle Clark, who I've interviewed on my channel before about other issues with the school system in Nevada, but now we're going to talk about another issue that she's experienced. So welcome to the program, sister girl.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me again. It was fun the last time.
It was. Now the subject matter isn't fun, but
No, it's not. No, it isn't. It's not fun at all. Unfortunately, we're back again with another aspect of indoctrination happening in our schools. I mean,
yes.
for the longest time, I had been fighting CRT indoctrination in schools on behalf of my son. And oddly enough, the gender ideology and the sexualization of children, that started with my daughter before my son. But unfortunately, that kind of took a back seat to what was happening with my son. So now I've had two children drastically affected by indoctrination in schools.
Mm-hmm.
While I was fighting for my son, my daughter was being socially transitioned at school through the guise of SEL, and it took some very drastic changes to bring her back from that cult. But I finally did after a lot of sacrifice and major changes in our lives.
So you mentioned SEL. Can you explain what that is, just for the people who don't know?
SEL is social emotional learning, and in its inception, it was useful and helpful. It was for primarily uh, uh, behavioral issues in schools, and to help teachers give their students a way to express themselves without lashing out, and to be able to understand empathy and understand um, discussion instead of acting out. And now it's turned into a transformative version of that, which is to somehow being understanding turned into your kid is trans. like like what? I mean, how did we get from being understanding and being empathetic and using our words to
Right.
now the kids are trans. So what started out as something good, just like with the CRT issue. CRT in and of itself wasn't necessarily a bad thing, but when it was being introduced into the K through 12 setting, it was done so with a slant and a skew that was harmful. Is harmful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And this now has become the same. It has presented in the same way. So I fought for my daughter, and I really, really was hesitant um, about going public with this issue, because, like
Mm-hmm.
most parents, I was embarrassed, because you think that it's your fault.
Yeah.
I knew that the the CRT indoctrination was not my fault. I knew that that wasn't my fault. But when you're talking about your kid having, having unhealthy sexual identity, you blame yourself. That's something that you automatically think, I'm not an attentive parent, and so my child is showing and exhibiting um, negative sexual identity behaviors, and that that is a lie. That is a lie. Because I've been in touch with families whose parents, they only have one child or two children, and they are very involved and very attentive. Some of them are, even both parents are doctors, one a psychiatrist, one a general physician, just a regular MD, and they still have their child is still captured by this transgenderism cult. I mean, this I mean, for any parent who thought that this was their fault and they are somehow responsible for what's happening to their children as far as trans ideology is concerned, that is a lie. It is not your fault. There is a huge push, and we've been pulling it apart and pushing back.
Yes, yeah, there is a huge push. And the more research I've done on this, I have seen a lot of cases where they are using creative ways to keep this stuff from the parents. Like, they are deliberately trying to cut parents out of the process. So there's a lot of deception that happens on the part of these school districts, and that they encourage these students to do. So I can understand why a parent might blame themselves, but you guys got to know that these school districts are very deliberately doing this stuff in a way that is designed to make sure you don't find out about it, at least not until it's too late. So can you kind of walk us through how everything began with your daughter, or how'd you start finding things out, or even just start from the beginning?
Well, with my daughter, I noticed some time ago that there was and just a general over sexualization of the kids in schools, all over schools. And I had to pull my daughter out of cheerleading because twerking was a thing. She was in the sixth grade. I mean, that was part of their routines. And it was just that. I mean, the little uniform aside, just the style of dance and everything was just too provocative. She's a kid. And so when that's when I really started to notice what was going on. And, there was a lot of intermingling in the upper schools that I felt was inappropriate. And that was what led me to pay more attention to her classes. During distance learning. And of course, I learned what I learned about CRT through her, because of what was going on as far as the over sexualization. So it really did start a long time ago. And when I moved her to another school, her behaviors went with it. And and in that instance, the schools were taking cues from the behaviors of the children, who and some of those children who were exhibiting some over sexualized behaviors were kind of targeted to get the extra treatment and the extra attention, so that they could assist them in their journey. So the SEL counseling started with the understanding that the children were suffering from some severe depression because of the lockdowns, because of the extended period that Las Vegas in particular was in the lockdown. And I was only in agreement with allowing her to attend the therapy sessions at the schools, because one of her friends had been hospitalized for
Wow.
self-harm. And this little girl came and stayed, stayed overnight with us. She was a very, very good friend. So yeah, my daughter was distraught. And her peers were all distraught, and we actually were calling for some sort of support for the children because of it. um, and so we did that, thinking that our children were in crisis, and we needed to help them in any way we could. I
Hmm.
did not know that that would eventually turn into my child being given pronouns and
Sure.
a new name, and being treated as a boy.
So these
I did
trainings,
not know that.
so these sessions, were they for all students, or did they pick certain students, or did you, or basically you had to volunteer your child for it, or I know your cat has something to say.
My kid, he is just, hang on just a second. Hang on. Let me hang on a second. Danica, come get Sharon. Sorry. He has severe anxiety. Get Sharon. He has some Take him downstairs. He has severe anxiety whenever she's away from him.
Oh,
Yes. So, but you know, the the idea that the children were, suffering from severe depression, it started out with just my daughter's friend group.
okay.
And then it extended to the entire school. And
Hmm.
what I learned in the process was that there was an actual certified therapist at one school in the SEL program, but in the SEL program at their sister school, there was no certified therapist. It was just somebody,
Oh, some person.
yeah, just somebody. And that was troubling. So I started to really pay attention to to some of the other things that were going on. And I did notice that there were behaviors that were not getting better, they were getting worse with
Okay.
all of her friends, with the exception of a couple. you know I mean, I had a parent say, can Danny come over, um because um our daughter is getting severely depressed, and she needs her friend.
Mm.
And then the two of them would get together, and then when they would separate, the both of them would be the worst,
Mm.
worse off. I mean, it was just a very unusual situation. And it started getting really weird. The makeup started getting darker. The behavior started getting more erratic and isolating, and just all of those kinds of things.
Okay.
Just and mean, just plain old mean and unkind. And that wasn't my daughter. That wasn't the person that I knew. I mean, my daughter was that person who would hug you and shut her eyes so tight,
Right.
you know what I mean? And just she was just a sweet and loving person. And to hear some of these cruel things that she would say to me, and that she would say to other people, and the sarcasm, the snarkiness, and all of that stuff, that wasn't who she was.
Well, there was a pretty
um
drastic change in personality then.
yes, extreme changes in personality. And it wasn't just with my daughter, it was also with some of the other children in her friend group.
Was this
um
like a gradual transition, or was it like overnight, or did it depend on the kid, or?
well, I can't speak to every single instance of her friends, but I do know that quite a few of them um, seem to gradually change into, and speaking with their parents, they would tell me they're just not, they're just not the same person. And we're all thinking this is a product of what the pandemic did to
Okay.
our children. So we all were just like, this is because the pandemic has messed everybody up, and this is what teenagers are like now. And then my daughter and I came here to Houston for the summer,
Okay.
and she went back to the delightful little girl she had been before.
Hmm.
And that was when I said, this is not just teenagers today. This is not because of the pandemic.
Right.
Something is happening to my daughter. Something is different about my daughter. And when we were ready to leave Houston to go back to Las Vegas, she was the bubbly, chipper, sweet girl that she had been before. And I knew that there was something very wrong going on in Las Vegas. And, when school started up again, I really paid close attention. And, I probably would have responded earlier, but, the the pandemic, and this fight and all of these things, life still happens.
Yeah.
My mother died and my grandmother died. They lived together. It was very traumatic for our entire family.
Yeah. I
Um,
remember you were going through a lot back then.
yeah, it was very hard. And, my daughter was going through it as well. So, lots of emotions and lots of behaviors
And you
were,
may even assume that that was part of her change. I mean,
right.
'cause she was going through that with you.
Yes. I mean, some of those things, some of those, acting out and all of that stuff, I had to differentiate what is this coming from? Where is this coming from? And really try to be gentle and try not to overreact,
Mhm.
when some of these things were happening. And then, some the thing that happened that made me say, nope, enough is enough, was when one of the administrators called my daughter Dan, and she was talking to me and she said, Dan.
Hmm. Was
And
that
I
a
was
slip of the
like,
tongue or was that on purpose?
that was a slip of the tongue, because when she looked at me and I looked at her, and she knew that I knew. And then she started calling her Danny. And
Mhm.
I just said, that's it. That is it. I knew, and I had already suspected, and I'd already addressed this with my daughter, and she wouldn't confirm it, but she wouldn't deny it either. And I knew then that there was something going on at my child's school. Now we haven't even gotten into um, we haven't even addressed the school really about this yet, because I'm still trying to figure out what in the world happened to my daughter. And right now, it really kind of doesn't matter, because I just want my daughter back.
Right.
And yeah, and at this point, it does. I don't have the luxury of going back to Las Vegas and saying, hey, and looking into all of this and trying to figure all of this out. My daughter was captured. I needed to get her back. So I spent the last 5 months, ever since we got here in January. I've spent that time trying to bring her back. And, I'm happy to say that I feel like um, I'm, successful. I was successful in bringing my daughter out of this cult and getting her back to her normal self. Now, that's not to say that she's not still a teenager and all teenagers are monsters, but she's a normal, she's
She's a
her
normal
normal self.
teenage mom. So, and I do want to talk about how you brought her out of that, because that's important. Parents need to know about this. But I want to kind of go back to like the indoctrination, and you may not know all the details, but what exactly were they feeding your daughter? I don't know how much she's told you, but how did this start? What were they doing exactly?
That's not, I can't answer that, because,
Mhm.
just like in any other cult, the innermost workings are secret. And I won't know that until I'm able to, get to a place where she's ready to tell me those things. And she's not
Okay.
yet. So, we do, I mean, she did confirm for me a couple of things that I suspected, but we haven't really gone into the details of all of the things that happened and all of the things that were said. And no,
Mhm.
and even then, it still won't be clear because she is a child.
Yeah.
So she's not she's not going to give me a full analysis with with all
Yeah.
of the neck neck
Hey.
do
Right.
and yeah, it's not going to be like that. So that may be something that we may have to ask hard to get those answers. We might have to ask hard to get that information. But I'm not above it. I
Yeah.
will ask hard if I have to, but
Yeah.
I will find out what happened to my daughter.
So let me, and if this is too much, if you don't want to answer, that's fine. I don't want to pry too much. So let me know where the line is. But did she give you an idea as to why she was taking on this other identity? Did she like explain, why she felt that a certain way, or?
Well, from the things that I've found in the other parents that I've spoken with, and believe me, it's been in between 10 and 16 hours a day
Mm.
of of working with, emails, DMs, talking to parents. Sometimes those conversations last for 3 hours. All of that stuff that I've been doing ever since I made it public about what was going on. And even before that, I was still really busy diving into all of this stuff. So there have been lots of different reasons why, but I wouldn't say they're reasons. I would say that they're ends. You know what I mean? They're it's a crack in a child's armor. You know what I mean? A chink in their armor, a place
Yeah.
where this can get in.
Some
And for my daughter,
vulnerability.
a vulnerability, yes. For my daughter, it was past trauma. So and we're seeing that with girls a lot is past trauma. But I also think there are other issues as well. My daughter is the youngest of four. I mean, of five. She's the
Mhm.
youngest of five. So her brothers all growing up and moving away. You know what I mean, and living their own lives. That is, something that I remember. As a kid, my sister had a very hard time with her two older sisters. Me and my second sister growing up and getting on with our own lives. She felt like we left her. You know what I mean? And my daughter had the same, was experiencing the same thing. There's other children that and I think this applies to my daughter as well. Being from a single parent family,
Mhm.
and not having communication with her father. Those are all vulnerabilities that leave us a space for just like any other cult to get in and capture her. But it's not just, and the reason why I say it's their end, because this is happening to parents, to parents who have been married and have good relationships and
Right.
have a good marriage, and their child still gets captured. I mean, in that instance, it's because the child might be secretly addicted to porn, or that child might
Mhm.
be secretly gay, or that child might feel isolated because they have a sibling that the parents spend more time with. You know what I'm saying? Or spend more of their attention on,
Yeah,
or
there could
their
be a lot of
parents
different
work.
things. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of different things with my daughter, and it's not ever one thing. It's usually multiple things, because they chip away at you. You know what I mean? They chip away at all of the things that make you insecure, so that they can kind of put that wedge between you and your parent, and saying, all of this is because you're not being loved enough. And that's where this really has been, it's been permitted to spread as far and capture as many children in our country as it has, because no matter what your issue is, the cult will find a way to infiltrate.
Now, okay, so going back to the conversation you had with the administrator when they had that slip of the tongue, and do you? I mean, because what I'm seeing is that the schools are usually encouraging this, while the child is at school, almost like a lot of these children are living double lives. Do you know how it happened with your daughter's circle of friends? I mean, did any of them kind of get into the transgender thing too, or?
Yeah, there was yes, there was another student who was trans, and that I do believe that was probably one of the first indicators that something was going on with my own daughter. You know, a lot of the times these kids try to stick together, and then the circle gets bigger and bigger and bigger, because they're accepting they accept everyone, and you're and and you get to have this wonderful circle of inclusive friends, and endless support, you know. But yes, and that's kind of, I mean, that's what I'm seeing across the board. And it doesn't matter what the circumstance is. I mean, I have several parents who have talked about especially with the older children in high school, that their girlfriend or boyfriend or the relationship that they're in, their romantic involvement, is trans or non-binary. I mean, and it started out as being non-binary. And I would tell any parent who is at all concerned about what's happening with their children, when they start identifying as non-binary, they're in it.
That's a tell.
They are in it. And yes, and if you can see that that's happening, you need to take action right away, because seriously, there's no stopping point for any of this. They don't ever say, they don't ever say, okay, well, I'm trans, and so I'm just going to be, like trans and just dress as a boy or dress as a girl. It always leads to medicalization. It always leads to some sort of break in reality, and some sort of neuroses or psychoses or whatever you want to call it, that there's something wrong with their bodies. I mean, with my daughter, it was having severe acne from the masks. The masks created severe acne all over her face, and it was hard to get under control. And so being ugly was something that she aspired to, whereas before it was all pigtails, makeup, and petticoats. You know what I mean? Literally petticoats.
So, okay, I was going to ask you that. So did you start to notice her dressing differently?
Yes, I mean, it was, and there were times where I had to tell her, you're not going out with us like that. I mean, it's one thing to express yourself, but you're not going out like nobody cares about you. You know what I mean? Go do something with yourself. You know what I mean? Like every parent should.
So you went Black Mom on it.
There is a point at which you have to say, go back and try again. You know what I mean? Go back and try again. And that doesn't mean that you're being critical of your kid. You know what I mean? you can there's stuff that you make them do before they leave the house. You have, if when you leave it, you have to be clean. You have to brush your teeth. You have to comb your hair. Those are all things that every parent, I don't care who you are, that's part of of child rearing
Yeah.
personal hygiene and that sort of thing. So, I would say that, part of personal hygiene, and when you're talking about part of personal hygiene, to also not go around looking like a homeless person. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
That's kind of, where I, draw the line. Yeah, you can wear your makeup, you can wear, your weird clothes and all of that stuff. But when it comes to, you're not going to look like, The Walking Dead when we go places. We're not doing that.
Yeah, no
That's
zombie.
not happening. Yeah. You're not going to look like a zombie when we're going places. Yeah. So save that for, and I mean, and that was also an aspect of this. The social media. The children that get reinforced with their social media communities. So if
Mhm.
they have a Discord, or if they have a TikTok, or if they have an Instagram, and they have, and they all seem to know each other, you know what I mean? Thousands of followers, and each one of these accounts has thousands of followers, you know what I mean? And they're following thousands of others. So it's like, and it's very scary when you go look into some of this stuff, because
Yeah.
all of these people are not children. There are quite a few predatory autogonophiles that are uh, kind of encouraging these young children to live their best life, and live their truth and all of this,
Yeah.
and spending their time indoctrinating kids. And that this person belongs on To Catch a Predator, you know what I mean? But they haven't done anything or said anything that would constitute illegal activity, but it's wrong. You know what I mean? You know that it's wrong.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. So I want to talk more about about the process of getting her out of it. So I want to hone in on that too, because that's important. But before we go there, just want to remind everybody to do not forget to head on over to libertynation.com, a proud sponsor of A Fresh Perspective, where you can sign up for the daily briefing or the member zone. You can check out all the latest cutting edge conservative news and analysis with none of the spin and all the nuance, where you can go deeper than just the usual superficial talking points. So check out new and original material on libertynation.com, where truth is making a comeback. So, Gabrielle, I wanted to ask you, so there was that comment from the administrator. You started noticing, and then at some point you figured out, okay, something ain't right here. Can you kind of give us an idea about how those early conversations went? And again, I don't want to pry too much, so you say what you're comfortable with saying, but can you give us an idea of how those early conversations went on when to start the journey out of that cult?
You know, a lot of it was just questioning, just question. Why do you feel this way? I mean, especially when there would be outbursts, and when there would be, the lashing out and stuff like that. Um, because, in the beginning, it was just an argument, always just this blow up and an argument. And then I started to notice that after the argument, she was happy, like satisfied. And I was like, that is not a normal response to an argument. Like, she was delighted and she loved me again. It was very bizarre.
Hmm.
And I said, you know what? That is uh something similar to like what gamblers experience when they lose. uh when they lose, and now it's time to go bet again. You know what I mean? It's trying to regroup and go bet again. I mean,
Mhm.
this was, and me living in Las Vegas, I recognize um this kind of euphoric behavior after somebody would lose, and then that meant they got to go and start over again. You know what I mean? It was a like the when they would lose big,
Right.
and now it was time for them to regroup and go in the fun of going to start over again. You know what I mean? Especially with people, like poker players and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So um, when I saw that, I was just like, this is not normal. And so that was when I stopped the arguments. So so I stopped the arguments and I stopped the fighting, and I would start asking the questions and trying to understand what exactly is going through your head right now. What exactly are you feeling right now? And for the longest time, it would be, I can't tell you. And like, well, why? Because I can't trust you. And then, okay, but you can't tell me because you can't trust me. But how am I going to fix it if I don't know so that you can trust me? It's just and then she couldn't answer that. And so I had to, like, and I hate to say it like this, but I just had to outsmart her. And
Right.
it wasn't easy because she's very
Yeah.
smart.
Look, and
That's
teenagers know everything anyway, right?
right. Right. And I'm not kidding. She is very smart. She's in the 98th percentile. That's a very, and it also affects highly intelligent children, and also children on the autism spectrum, Asperger spectrum. So it affects them disproportionately. And my daughter is, highly intelligent. So, trying to outsmart her was hard. So, I had to really just think, what, how am I going to break through this trust situation? And then I started to kind of chip away at it little by little. And it was some tough stuff going on. You know what I mean? Like, there were some tough conversations that we had to have, and I had to call her bluff quite a few times. I don't, a lot of parents may not be ready to do that, because a lot of therapists will tell you, had been telling people prior to all of this, was the watch and wait response. So prior to all of this, when there was some sort of trans behavior, it was the watch and wait approach, and usually they would grow out of it.
Right.
But
Like about
this
85,
isn't
90%
that.
do.
Yes, but this isn't that.
Mm-hmm.
This is not just your typical body dysmorphia type stuff like all teenagers go through when they hit puberty, or when a little kid wants to be a girl because they have a sister and the sister gets a lot of
Right.
attention, pretty clothes, and blah blah blah. This is not that. This is being captured by a cult. So the response is different. So instead of the watch and wait response like there had previously been, I I knew that this was not something that I could just wait it out.
Yeah, because
That
it
this,
wasn't happening organically. It sounds like,
right.
yeah,
This
it
was
wasn't
not
happening
happening.
naturally. Like, these ideas were being instilled in her.
And our visit to Houston made that realization clear to me. That this was not her. This was her environment. And so in order to really get to the heart of what was going on, I had to assess the situation as the environment is the root cause, and not just body dysmorphia. So with that, I started making some hard line declarations. You are not a boy. That, period.
How did she
And
respond to
you know, It wasn't always great. I'm not gonna lie to you. I mean, we're talking about my child here, okay? So anybody who knows me knows that I'm not easily swayed. You know what I mean? And we're
That
talking
doesn't
about
fall
my
far from the
mini
tree
me.
then.
Right? We're talking about my mini me. So making some hard declarations like that, um, a lot of the time, it was met with a little hostility, and it wasn't always the easiest response, and the easiest to deal with. But I had to keep doing it, and I had to keep making the point and making um, presenting the proof. So when there would be a situation, her reaction, I would say, now see, that is a female response. If you were
Mm.
a boy, that would be a different response. You would have done something different. And you know how I know that? Because I got 4 sons. And I know exactly this exact same situation when it happened to your brothers. That was not their response. You had the exact same response that I had when I was young.
So
And
it's almost like you had to reaffirm what femininity is and what it
yes,
looks like,
right.
and
I
pointed
mean,
out when she actually and you had to make sure that you pointed it out when she exhibited it.
right. And that was, I mean, and I think that as far as our interactions go, that was very, very convincing for her.
Mm.
Um, but I still had to admit to myself I was not going to get anywhere while she was in this environment.
Yeah, and that was step
And
one on your Twitter. You had to get her out of
yes,
that environment.
I had to get her out of that environment. And, like I said, I remember what she was like when she was here. And so, the first 3 steps were kind of simultaneous steps. So, I got her out of the environment, meaning I took her out of this when the Christmas break came. I said, that's it. We're moving to Houston. And I had been, preparing her for that for several months um, before, and just planting the seed, and working on her in the process, working on pointing out, see, that's a girl thing, what you're doing right now. That's a girl thing. That's
Mhm.
not, that's how I know you're not a boy, because that's 100% female right there. If you were a boy, that you wouldn't have done that. You know what I mean? Or this wouldn't have happened. I mean,
Right.
so I was planting those seeds all the while. And then when it was time for us to move, I said, okay, we have to go. We have to go. And so, we spent the last Christmas with her brothers, and we packed up our things and jumped in a U-Haul, and I tried to make it fun. You know, that I spent a lot of time trying to figure out, okay, I do not want to get into no physical altercation while I'm driving trying to fight off a teenager because I won't let her use her phone. You know what I mean? Like I need I need to like
Yeah, that
make
one with the road
sure.
trip with no phone, no screens, because I know that's the second step. You took the phone away, so you had to drive all, and you were in. And wow, that's a long drive. Because I remember going through Texas when I was coming from California to go to Louisiana with no screens, and when you're used to having screens.
Yes, no
Surprised you both are
screen.
still alive. I'm surprised you're not behind bars.
Well, that took some preparation. So let me tell you what we did. I mean, and I knew. I mean, this whole thing, it's just like anything else. When you get ready to make a move like this, you don't just spontaneously do it. When
Right.
you're trying to condition or raise your children, you prepare. There's lots of things that you can't prepare for, but when you're getting ready to have a baby, you better have some diapers and some bottles and some,
Exactly.
formula or breast pump, whichever you know what I mean. Like you have to make all of these decisions, and you have to make sure that you have it ready. I mean, and this was no different. I made sure that she had clean, comfortable clothes available on the journey, access to arts and crafts because she is an artist. I put playlists of songs that we both like, so that when she was awake, because a lot of this journey she slept. So when she was awake, we were listening to stuff that we both could jam out to, which also created a bonding
Right.
environment for the both of us.
Right.
I let her eat at whatever crap food restaurant that she wanted, which is also an aspect of this because the detox is real. And the detox is a real issue. It's a real thing, and it's a physical.
That's an interesting word to use, detox.
Mhm.
And I'm going to throw this at you because I'm like thinking I'm getting myself in the mind of somebody who would be disagreeing with you. And they'd be saying, "Oh, so transgenders, they have to detox from it, or is this like a drug or whatever?" To me, it's like, I know that transgender is a thing, gender dysphoria or whatever. I'm not saying that it's all a cult, but but in this instance, this is different from, how do I want to put it, from a normal organic way of discovering that one has issues with their gender, because this was a conditioning that was happening at her school. So that's why the word detox to me makes sense.
Well, the detox is okay. So the detox is not from the transgenderism per se. The detox is from social media. So, and from the devices. Because the devices in the social media create a similar kind of addiction that gambling does. You get hits you get dopamine hits from the affirmation, from the likes, from the retweets, from the, you know what I mean? You get a dopamine hit. And if you've ever spent 12 hours on Twitter,
Me?
who, me?
I am never on Twitter, I will have you know. It's very rare.
So, anybody who lives on Twitter like we do, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You know that when one of your posts does well, you get excited, you get happy, you can feel the dopamine hit, right? So, and I took all of this into account when I was creating this system. And I I did this, and I did this on purpose, and it was planned, and it was executed to with the utmost attention to not doing any more harm, like just being as gentle as I could with my daughter, especially in the first phase. Because you can't just go and throw all of this stuff out at them. You know what I mean? And the second phase, there's other aspects of this that get a little tougher. But pulling them out and making the decision to relocate, making sure you have the money, someplace to go, all of those things. That wasn't, that was months of planning. And the execution over those 2 days of detoxing her from her devices and from social media. And let me just say, it went on for a longer period of time because I mistakenly thought, like every parent does, that they can handle a little bit, so she could keep her phone. You know what I mean? And so we could, we can be in contact, those kinds of things, and thinking that would be okay. And I later found out that was not something that she was going to be able to do. It took me about 2 or 3 weeks into, well, maybe a month into the process, when I said, okay, all social media, all electronics, everything gone, no more. But those 2 days we spent with with the exception of listening to the music on the iPad, that was really the only time that she had. I think I gave her an hour at the end of every day to communicate with her brothers in her immediate circle of friends on Discord.
Okay.
But that was it. There was no, you know what I mean? Like there was no just surfing the whole time. And even that was very limited. She didn't actually get an entire hour of doing that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and that was just basically for safety. We were on a long distance road trip. You know what I mean? And to maintain safety, we checked in with our family. But you know, um, we spent I let her have whatever food that she wanted, whatever she wanted to drink, just because, like I said, the detox is real. It's a real thing. And so, I replaced the the addiction with caffeine and sugar, like you would any other addiction. And later in the second phase, we went to a whole food diet. But in this first leg of this journey, I did kind of try to soften the blow of the detoxing process with a fun diet. um and the last thing was, and I do talk about that a little bit on Twitter, when I discuss the steps of how I went about getting her out. Then the last step of the first phase is getting heavily involved with extended family. So we spent every day, every minute, every hour that we could with extended family. So my dad's cousins, right? My dad's cousins and my aunts and you know what I mean? Like they were all involved in her daily life every single day.
So
So,
she was meeting new cousins, new people that she was related to who she didn't really know before.
right. And not only that, but we can see you, Pete.
I was trying not to be in the camera.
Too late, you're a superstar now.
So I did there. I mean, she did meet some of them over the summer. And she maintained contact with some of them. So the ones that she had a real connection to, she spent a lot more time with them. And she had never been to church before because I'm an atheist, so she had never been to a church before for a service. I mean, we'd been to churches before for other things because a church has a lot of function in society, but she had never been for a service. So she went to my cousin's church with them, and she was like, it's interesting, it's interesting, it was fun, that kind of thing. So just giving her other experiences, because I don't care about what she believes in, as long as her beliefs are healthy. You know what I mean? If she grows up to be a Christian, I'm fine with it. I'm fine with it as long as she, maintains, healthy behaviors through her Christianity. Because anybody can have terrible behaviors. One of the people that I looked into when I was researching all of this was Megan Phelps, who defected from the Woodsboro Baptist Church. She was one of the influences and the inspirations for the processes that I took. I remembered her from way back when we watched that. I watched that live. I mean, I remember her, her and Kevin Smith yelling at each other at the premiere for Red State, the movie that he made about them. I remember that, thinking to myself, she's engaging with them. She's engaging with the outside world, which her family had never done before. And I remember thinking to myself, somebody is getting in. Somebody is getting in, and eventually she may end up escaping that. And she did. And I remember thinking that. And when I was going through all of this, and I started researching deprogramming, escaping from cults. I started watching stuff about, escaping from Scientology, escaping from Mormonism, escaping from the Warren Jeffs family, all of that stuff. I started watching all of that stuff, and I had gone back and rewatched Megan Phelps' TED Talk. Because, that she was, I remembered that. And I started thinking, I have to formulate a real plan for my daughter. Because I might only get one shot. Because if I do this wrong, if I do this the wrong way, the outcome could be disastrous. And in some ways, the most disastrous that any parent could think of. Because she was cutting, and there was self-harm. There was all of that stuff. And so, we're talking about something that, like, you can't take this lightly, because detransitioners still commit suicide. Even if when you transition, the transitioners commit suicide, but detransitioners do too. Yeah. So I had to take into account exactly what I was doing. And I'm doing this all without a therapist, advice, because I was afraid that whoever I spoke to was going to insist upon gender reaffirming. Yeah. And so I said, I just can't take that risk. Hey, I had my babies at home. I did this research to make sure that I was giving birth to my babies in a safe environment, safer than what they would have had in a hospital.
Yeah.
So when it was time to pull my daughter out of this cult, I implemented the exact same research criteria that I had for myself whenever I decided to have my babies at home. And anybody can do this. I have a 9th grade education. You know your kids. You know them. Anybody can do this. If you're willing, and if you're serious about pulling your child out of this, it can be done. But you have to be ready, and you have to prepare, and you have to be committed. And I mean, like, committed, like most parents aren't. Most parents that I've seen and that I've talked to, they have the means and they have the resources, but they don't want to quit their jobs, or they don't want to leave their environment.
It's a drastic change. It's a drastic steps that you have to take. It's not lightweight stuff.
Yeah, this is hardcore stuff. But, I've never been one of those people who is so attached to my environment or so attached to my money or anything like that, that I'm going to risk the safety and welfare of my children.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So, you got her out of the environment, you took the screens away, you got around some other family. So did this kind of start off what you call phase 2, or how did it proceed from there?
Once we got to that place where she was trusting other adults besides me. So I needed, because that was very, very key. I needed her to rely on other people besides me, because whenever I started the steps for the second phase, I needed the support, and I needed her to hold in high regard somebody else, because she wasn't, because I'm the enemy still, you know what I mean, at this point. And so I need her to hold other people that she trusts in high enough regard for whenever I say something, where whenever I tell her something, she would take their opinion as truth, or at the very least as sincere, you know. So it took some time to get to that place. And I also needed to get her excited about some other things. You know, and you know, phase two, one of the hard things about this is trying to get it all straight into my mind and relay it to the public responsibly.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I'm not a therapist, and I'm not a, you know, all I can do is tell you what I did.
Right.
And hopefully you can see, you know, a path to doing it, you know, for other parents to do it for their own children. But I also want to, you know, be clear, you know, the only reason why I spoke out is because I watched Abigail Martinez tell her story at the Heritage Foundation with Nicole Solis. And when I watched that, and I watched her talk about how they took her daughter and medically transitioned this child who was having severe mental illness issues and problems. And instead of getting her the psychological and probably medical help that she really desperately needed, they gave her testosterone, which you know, that is, you know, we see how that affects boys when they're in, you know, when they're first starting puberty, how sometimes that can be, you know, very traumatic for them just normally. And the problems that they have, you know, my sons, you know, when they started puberty, it was difficult. I mean, there was growing pains, there was aggression that they didn't know what to do with, you know what I mean? All of those things. So giving it to a girl where it doesn't belong, she don't know how to handle that.
Yeah.
And, you know, that little girl stepping in front of that train and the way they treated her mother before and after it happened was completely and totally disgusting. And I had made sure that my daughter was not going to experience that. And I knew that was a possibility before I did any of this. I knew that something like suicide or self-harm or something like that was a potential possibility before I started any of this. And to have it confirmed with Abigail Martinez's story just let me know that I did the right thing, but it also let me know that I had to speak out publicly about it because, first of all, I had the platform, and the credibility. Quite frankly, you know, people know me and they trust me. And they know that I'm, you know, that I'm not just making some nonsense up, you know, and that I've already been on the receiving end of one aspect of indoctrination with my son. And so, and not only that, but I was able to successfully pull my child out. So I agonized over it. Because, you know, I did not want to expose our family this way. Certainly not again, you know, after my son. And my son made it very clear that he did not want to have anything to do with any of this publicly, you know, himself. And I respected that, you know, I respected that decision. And he still has maintained that position. But with my daughter, you know, I also had to weigh out, am I betraying her by doing this? Excuse me, would I be betraying her by doing this? Because she's still too young to say yes or no on that front. You know what I'm saying? Or I feel like that she's too young to know the repercussions of what this could potentially mean down the line. And so, you know, I had to really agonize with this. But you know what? I just couldn't live with myself. I just could not live with myself if I had answers and I had a relatable story. You have no idea how many people. Yes, you have no idea how many people have emailed me and DM me and all of that stuff since I started speaking out about this. I mean, and I have nightmares about this and dream about it. And I mean, I wake up and the first thing I do is start checking email. I mean, because it's happening to too many children.
Yep.
And so I could not live with myself if I didn't speak out, because I had answers and I knew that there were people out there who didn't. And they weren't going to get any either, because there's too many therapists who disagree with the reaffirming, but they also won't speak out because they don't want to lose their license.
Exactly.
And they don't want to be canceled. So we're on our own, and I'm going to keep quiet. I couldn't live with myself. I just couldn't do it.
Yeah, I feel you on that. So how do things stand now? So you've gone through this process, and it was a long one, and I'm sure it's still kind of ongoing. What do things stand right now with your daughter?
Well, she's talking to me.
That's good.
I mean, you saw her sneak in here in my. I mean, because we're a family again,
Mm-hmm.
and we're and it's inconvenient. She's not going and hiding in her room with the door shut and trying to exclude me from her life anymore.
Mm.
And at the very least, that's more than you can ask for most teenagers.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, that's more than what most teenagers will give you.
Yeah, at the very, William. William, there were days where I'd be lucky if I get a full sentence out of William. Most of the time it was stuff like, can you go to Walmart and give me some pickles? I mean, what are you gonna make something for dinner? Do we have any more ice cream? Those were the, generally the only sentences that I would get out of William. And Danica and I went to see Romeo and Juliet, the first opera that I've ever been able to take her to, the first opera that I've seen in 15 years. And I am an avid opera fan.
Nice. Richard.
Yeah, I'm not just some Philistine that just is shit posting on Twitter all the time. No, I'm not, I know I talk a lot of nonsense most of the time, but I got a big brain under here. But that was one of those things that was part of the way I could entice her to come here, is that Houston is the third largest city in the country. Fourth largest, third largest. I think they flip flop between here and Chicago, maybe. And there's 5-6 million people that live here. It's the most diverse city in the entire country, even more diverse than New York City, which a lot of people don't know, but it is. There's more languages spoken here. There's more ethnicities. There's more cultural diversity here than any other place in the country. So there's so much that you can get from Houston, so much more than what we could get from Las Vegas. And NASA is here. She's very interested in STEM. So all of these things, were part of how I kind of made sweeten the pot for her to want to move here, or to be, at the very least, be open to it and be okay with it.
Yeah.
She didn't want to. And even after we were here for a month, she still was like, I want to go back home, kind of thing. But now she does, she is getting into it, and she's getting the most out of it. We went to her school for an art exhibit, and it was really fun, and we had a really good time. Like I said, we went to the opera the other day. When I first got here, I got some birthday money from some relatives, and the first thing I did was bought opera tickets because I hadn't been to an opera in several years. So that was, when I got my birthday money in January, I bought opera tickets, and I bought tickets to the ballet because she is a ballet dancer. Yeah. And so, she won a scholarship to the Nevada Ballet Academy years and years ago. And so she'd been, a ballerina for 7 years
Oh,
and 6 years, I want to say. So, she had never seen a really great ballet. And we will next month. So, those are the kinds of things that I was able to use the things that she was interested in to entice her to at least be open to the idea. And now that we're here, she's embraced it. Like I said, this was not just some, spontaneous, okay, well, let's get up and move. This was very, very thought out and planned and engineered so that we had the best chance of success.
good, good. So we're getting to the end of the time here, but I wanted to ask you. I mean, for parents who might be watching this and maybe they suspect something's going on with their kids, or maybe they just found out that they've been conditioned in this way and that their school has done whatever. What is the one main thing that you would want them to know?
It's not your fault.
Mm.
It's not your fault. So you don't have to be embarrassed and ignore it or not reach out for help.
Right.
So it's not your fault. And there is help. It's not professional help because we don't have no experts that are going to help you. That's for sure. I mean, there might be some, but they're few and far between, and they are very much still undercover. So it's not going to be. But there's a community of parents who want to recapture their children, and we are helping each other. You can always reach out to me on Twitter. At Gabs Clark 5. And I always respond to everyone. And my DMs are always open. I'm doing everything. I mean, so there's help. And you can bring them back. If you catch it early enough, you can bring them back. And even if you don't, there are communities. There's Gen Spec. There's Facebook groups. There's all kinds of support. So even if you can't recapture your kids, you can at least stay abreast of what is the new remedies or new therapies or new ideas that are popping up, so that maybe in the future you may. Because some of these people, their kids are already out of K through 12. And unfortunately, when they're grown, this ain't going to work. Yeah. You know what I mean? This is something that I did for my kid because she's still my kid. She's still in middle school. But you don't have to be embarrassed. It's not your fault. And there is help. There is a community of parents that can help give you some advice. And at the very least, you can vent to them and vent out your frustration so that you're not just holding all of this in. And I'm gonna do everything that I can. I'm gonna be going over the next phases, and the last phase of it is inoculation. We're gonna talk about how to keep your kid from getting into it, how to keep your kid from how to teach them to know the difference and know the difference between real friendship and this cult, that being sucked into this cult. And know the difference between what's real and what's not real. And know how to spot these things and know who is safe and who isn't. Right. That's the last phase of this. And that there's some, that's not going to come from me because I'm not there yet. But that's going to come from some of the other parents who I feel like have a better understanding than me. But there's I'm still working on being able to accurately explain the second phase of this, and hopefully before the end of the year, I'll be able to put together, you know, a little manual, if you will, on how I did it, and hopefully that parents can extrapolate ideas from it to help their own children.
Great. Well, before we sign off, why don't you let everybody know where they can find you?
You can find me on Twitter, and I don't usually give out my email address, but I will, because, you know, I know parents really need the support. But my email address is gabs5minds at icloud.com. And that's Gabs with the number 5 minds at icloud.com. And you can find me on Twitter at Gabs Clark 5. You can also find me on Getter and on Truth Social.
Awesome. Well, we'll have to reconnect when you get the rest of the phase 2 done and go over that as well. But thanks for joining me. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, Charles. It's always a good time.